So I want to introduce Michele Wucker. She is actually a global thought leader and author of RHINO, How to Recognize and Act on the Obvious Dangers We Ignore. And she's from United States. She's the closing keynote. She's online here. And I want to request Michele for her closing keynote. Over to you, please.
Thank you, and thank you for pulling everyone together today. Are you guys hearing a lot of feedback on your end? Or is it okay?
It's okay.
It's okay? Okay, I'm getting a little feedback. Okay, it's gone now. Technical challenges. I wanted to talk to you all today about a big gray rhino that's related to the theme of this conference. As you know, gray rhinos are the big obvious challenges that people are talking about, but that we often don't seem to solve, no matter how important we think they are. It's a metaphor for the big, scary 2-ton thing coming at you. Its horns pointed at you. It's pawing the ground and snorting. And if you don't pay attention, you're going to get charged and trampled. They're gray because, as you know, there are 5 species of rhinos, one of which is the black rhino, and the other one is the white rhino. The black ones are not black. The white ones are not white. They're all gray, which is the most obvious thing, but we don't say it. It's a metaphor for how we look away from the obvious things that are important. And around the themes of diversity and inclusion come the theme of inequality, whether it's inequality of opportunity, of wealth, of income. And we're starting to see this in much more relief than we have. Of course, many of you read Thomas Piketty's 2013 bestseller on inequality and the drag it creates to the economy and how it's a big threat. And lots of people have sort of hemmed and hawed over this. It's, of course, one of the Sustainable Development Goals, number 10, but we don't seem to be making much progress on it. Every year, Oxfam releases a report at the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum in Davos, drawing attention to inequality and pointing out how much the richest people in the world make compared to the rest of us. In 2019, the 500 richest people in the world got $1.2 trillion richer. They became 25% richer in 1 year. A few months later, a lot of that has disappeared because of the market crash, because of the coronavirus pandemic. It's as if people didn't, bet against the markets, they probably lost that. But that wealth that disappeared was really sort of an illusion. It was a popped bubble. That wealth had been created through monetary policy that was not applied equally around the world. And it was applied in such a way that only a small part of the population benefited. And the pandemic, in addition to popping that bubble, has shown us that income and wealth economy are a much bigger problem than just a drag on the global economy. We are seeing around the world people without access to safety, people who are losing their jobs because of the pandemic, are actually creating a chain effect going up through the economy. A lot of people talk about the trickle-down effect, that if you throw money at the biggest corporations and the richest people, it will create jobs and trickle down to everyone else. And we're now seeing what happens when you have a lack of trickle up. And it's really hitting the most vulnerable employees the most. You're seeing a gap between workers who get paid sick leave and those are paid by the hour, who don't get paid if they don't work. We've seen so many sad stories of people going out and saying, I have to work or I can't eat. And that means they can't social distance, they can't stay home. They have to go out and risk exposing themselves and others to the virus. They literally have to risk their lives to stay alive, which is a tragic situation. We see that a lot of the people who are most vulnerable are the sort of, frontline service employees, the salespeople, waiters, clerks, landscapers, cleaning staff, people who interact with other people and who now all of a sudden lost their jobs. We're also seeing inequality of access to testing. There's been a lot of people upset in the United States that politicians and celebrities somehow seem to be getting access to coronavirus tests, but other people don't. And for the poorest, for the people who are least equal, the impact is catastrophic, absolutely losing their lives. Here in Chicago, where I'm based, we're seeing that a lot of the victims, disproportionate share, are African-American from some of the poorest neighborhoods in the city. But we're seeing now a sort of chain of connection and interdependence that hasn't been as evident in previous situations. That's affecting our ability to save lives and the economy. People with no reserves can't spend money. There's been a lot of debate in past financial crises about money going to people who already have reserves. Some very smart economists have made the point that the people who are most likely to spend the money and keep the economy going are the people who are living closest to the edge. That's why one of the first things policymakers have come up with is helicopter money, getting money out to people as quickly as they can. In the United States, we just heard this morning that some of that helicopter money meant for small businesses has already run out. So it shows how big the problem is and how we haven't been dealing with it. But so we're now seeing that businesses and property owners are not insulated from everybody else's struggles. You're seeing stories of landlords whose tenants can't pay rent anymore. You're seeing creditors who are finding that their companies that owe them money have trouble paying because they can't open their doors for the business that they need. We're seeing slaughterhouses where workers are falling ill and all of a sudden grocery stores can't get meat. We're seeing sad videos of dairy farmers who can't get their products to market and they're pouring milk out on the ground when there are so many people who are going hungry and even more in this situation. And so it's really striking to the heart of the market economy. So I've just given you a very stark picture of the results of not paying attention to inequality, the bad things that happen if you don't pay attention to it. And I want to flip it to the benefits of extending equality. What can you be striving for? There's been some evidence that the more equal societies tend to be more cohesive, more productive, less violent. There's less anxiety. And that right now, the very nature of capitalism and the market economy is under threat. So in order to continue to have a market economy, we need to pay more attention to inequality, because helping the people at the bottom is what's going to help to get the economy back. We need opportunity of access to emergency funds. We need access to education, opportunity to develop human capital and potential so that doesn't go wasted. Equality of the ability to take good risks and to be protected from bad risks. This goes in particular for small businesses and entrepreneurs. Tax policy. Right now we have a lot of policies that subsidize things that are dangerous, like the speculation we've seen in the markets. A lot of that is the result of tax policies that actually favor the stock market over the real economy. So we don't even have equality within the economy among different industries and different financial activities. And gaining that will help us to restart companies and help us to bring the economy back. Question is, what does it take? How do we move towards more equality? And I argue that we need a mindset shift. After all the talking that people do about inequality, we all know it's a problem, but we've seen precious little progress. And in fact, in many cases, as we saw with the numbers from last year on the growth of the wealth of the richest, we've actually been becoming less equal. And I hear a lot of, here's why we can't solve the inequality problem. There's no political will. Oh, this would take policies that are unpopular among the people who are in power. And this crisis is a real opportunity to shift to asking ourselves, what does it take to solve inequality? What are the benefits of it? And what can each of us do to make that happen? We need a critical mass of people who feel a sense of urgency and people who feel the confidence that it's worth the effort to try to make change happen. We need a sense of human agency and commitment to positive changes. This might happen because of a catastrophe, but really we should be looking forward to try to create systems that don't require a catastrophe to be fixed. So the question that a lot of people have been asking about the COVID-19 pandemic and all of the economic destruction that's going with it is, how do we get to not the same normal? How do we get back to normal? That's not the question. It's how do we get to a new normal? And I argue that trying to promote equality and succeeding is the way to get there. Because trying to heal the most vulnerable parts of the economy and of population at the bottom are the fastest way to get money flowing through, to save lives, to rebuild a health system, and to rebuild the companies that have been hurt so badly. If you look at the capital markets, in theory, the markets show what you expect in the future in terms of earnings and dividends, what the companies are going to generate, and people are going to want a share of that. But we've now seen big investors coming out and saying that all they're really doing is counting on more money printing from the world's central banks. So in other words, that they're basically going to put their money into a casino, but they're still not finding reasons to put that into the real economy. So right now, as governments talk about possible helicopter money policies, looking at central bank policies, looking at fiscal policies, they need to take a real break from what they did in the past, where they focused on this trickle down, and focus instead on trickle up, find ways to get money to the people who need it most, find ways to set up a healthcare system where you have equal access. Because when you have a society with pandemics, the weakest link is going to affect the entire society. You get a reverse effect of equality. You get equality in the worst things happening. And what we want to do is instead create equality of the best things that are happening. So if there is a silver lining in this crisis, and many people are looking desperately for one, and because it's the only way to maintain any hope that we can get through this, I think it really is focused on equality, on stopping with all these tired reasons why we can't deal with inequality, but instead to recognize that we can't afford not to confront this huge gray rhino, the inequality gray rhino. And that's the message I really want to leave you with today. This whole event has been about inclusion, bringing more people in to reach their potential in business, to rely on diversity, to celebrate the benefits of diversity, which is another way of looking at equality, equality of access, equality of respect for people's ideas, equality of appreciation for the contribution that so many people make. I think about all the businesses that just can't get by without the hourly workers, without the people who are unappreciated so much of the time. And here I hear two sets of wildly different stories. I hear about people using a DoorDash delivery service And when they order, they'll put in a big tip so that they hope that the drivers will take the gig and deliver the food. And then they go back in afterwards and they remove the tip. So the drivers show up and they don't get anything. And I hear those stories and I get furious. On the other hand, I hear some incredibly heartwarming stories. This morning, I read about a bakery where a customer called in and wanted to order a donut. Like many of us who are sheltering at home, the customer felt like he'd gained a little too much weight. So he didn't want to buy a lot of donuts, but he did want to support the store. So he asked them if he could pay $1,000 for one donut. And he did. And he actually left the owners of the store crying. And I'm looking for more and more stories like that of people who have the means to show how much they appreciate the people who may not have the means, but who are providing daily joy for others, who are helping to keep the chain of interactions going, that helps the economy going, that it pays the suppliers of the flour and the butter and the eggs and the sugar that go into the donuts, but that also give people energy and joy to go on and do all the things that they do that provide benefit to society. So I think as we're looking for the way out, equality is really the way to get there. So looking not just at getting out of the way of the inequality gray rhino, but to try to harness its strength and look at how by solving that problem, we can all get somewhere together that we want to be. So thank you so much for bringing people together for the important things we've been talking about today, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
So I would like to ask you, from your rich experiences, what are 3 things that you would advise in terms of if we really wanted to tackle this at a macro level? What would be 2-3 strategies that you would advise in terms of reducing the income inequality? Certainly under COVID is even more striking for many emerging economies and developing countries.
Sure. Without getting too economic geeky, which I tend to do, on the one hand, I think really looking at monetary policy, which is something I spent a lot of time thinking about. A couple of the analysts I respect the most in the US have said that between 75% and 93%, depending on how you calculate it, of the monetary expansion that took place after the 2008 crisis went straight into stock markets and not into the real economy. So you have a lot of people like wringing their hands over why aren't wages climbing? Why aren't more people employed? Why is consumer debt so high? And the answer is that the money went into the markets. And of course, it's very different in different countries. But in the United States, for example, even after they lowered corporate tax rates, it still makes more sense from a tax point of view to put your money into a speculative bubble than into the real economy. So I think look at the relationship between monetary policy, tax policy, and the markets and the real economy. So I think that's a very, very big one. Also, in terms of tax policy, there's a lot of money that's wasted on subsidizing things that are counterproductive. Like in the United States, there's more money spent on subsidizing fossil fuel companies than on education. And of course, investors over the past year have started paying a lot more attention to the relationship between investment risk and climate change risk, and realizing that when you're investing in fossil fuel companies and you're basically investing in the emissions that they are producing, and that in turn is hurting, for example, real estate investments. If you have oceanfront properties, those are going to lose value. So there's been more of an appreciation of investing in companies that don't hurt other companies, other industries, and citizens. And I think that it really does go back to this question of health. It's very interesting that's taken a public health emergency to show all the other cracks in society and things that we're not doing well. Again, it's different in every country, but in the United States, one of the problems that we've had is that many people's health insurance is tied to their job. And so when they lose their jobs, they lose their health insurance. And with pandemics, when not everybody has access to good health care, everybody becomes more vulnerable. So that's, if you look at the whole system around healthcare and basically how vulnerable people are, you see that it's a system. A lot of the data around COVID-19 shows that people who have other conditions, high blood pressure, heart problems, obesity, those are the people who are suffering the most, as well as of course, older people with all the conditions that often come with old age. But things like high blood pressure and obesity are things that can be addressed with preventative care. And not everybody has the time or the resources to go to a nutritional counselor, to go to the gym, to have a trainer. So I think national programs that support healthcare can help productivity at jobs. They can help to protect us all from pandemics, and can have a huge domino effect on improving society. So equality in access to healthcare is huge. So those would be my top recommendations.
So we have a question from Netherlands, from Stella Deschna, and I thought that would be interesting. You touched upon it. She says, how do we reduce social inequalities, and in particular, income generating opportunities for low income households, people at the bottom of the pyramid?
That's such a great question. Thank you, Stella. It's been very interesting to see that inequality between nations has been decreasing by many measures, and paradoxically, in the United States, has actually fed some of the political tension, because people here resent that, when it's actually a good thing for the United States that other countries are doing better, because it means that they can buy more goods. The whole debate about trade policy, to me, is upside down. It's not a matter of one country out competing the other. It's about countries that do better at one thing, exporting those things, and that helps everybody to do better. It goes back to classic Adam Smith economics. So on a certain level, it's very sad to me to see that inequality between countries in some of the wealthier countries is actually hurting inequality within countries. And that goes back to tax policies and other things that mean that the top level of each country is benefiting more from globalization and from the decrease in inequality between countries. So I think it really goes down to policies to look at that top level of society. We had some news reports recently that the top earners in the United States are now paying a lower percentage of their earnings in taxes than the rest of the population. And that's not just percentage of disposable income, because for much of the population, people are living paycheck to paycheck, and there's not much disposable income at all. A very widely quoted study in the United States says that 40% of Americans would have trouble meeting a $400 emergency expense. And we're now seeing weeks and weeks out of work, which is an awful lot more than $400. So within the United States, I think we need to look at the top part of the population paying their share, to look very, very closely at our market policies. A lot of companies spent a lot of money on buybacks of their shares, and they're now getting big government bailouts. There's a lot of controversy over that, saying, hey, that the taxpayers should get a share of whatever benefits those companies are getting. So I still believe that you can, and actually that you should, try to continue to reduce inequality between countries. But you can only do that while also addressing inequality within countries. That has not been happening. And I think that that failure has been part of this backlash against globalization that we've been seeing, that ultimately is going to leave everybody worse off.